I was walking to the kitchen at 2 a.m. to get a glass of water when I heard my brother and stepmom whispering. I hid behind the kitchen closet and listened to them talking. This plan is going to work. I just feel it in my bones. Did you remember to leave the letter? Yup, they'll never know what hit them. Let's go, grab the car keys. I followed them to the garage and hid behind the door. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want them to see me. They started packing things into the car. It was very weird. They went inside the house to get more stuff. I sneaked into the garage and quietly opened the trunk to see what's in there, when suddenly I heard them coming back, and without thinking, I jumped in the trunk of the car. It was the only place I could hide. I wanted to wait for them to leave, but then I could hear them getting into this car and starting the engine. Whatever their plan was, it wasn't worth me being stuck in the trunk. I started yelling as loud as I could. Just as I was about to take a deep breath to scream even louder, I heard my stepmother, Casey, say, "Did you hear something? I thought I heard your sister's annoying voice." Imagine if she ever found out about this. She would expose us to the world. "Don't worry, Casey," said my brother. "If Haley ever found out, we would take care of her, just like we took care of that dumb secretary of my dad." I held my breath. I couldn't let them know I was in there. I started to panic. They were up to no good. I know I never had the best relationship with the two of them, but I couldn't believe that they would hurt me. I had so many questions. What did they do to my dad's secretary? I needed to find out their secret. And just like that, I ended up stuck in the trunk of their getaway car. I could hear them laughing and singing along to songs on the radio, as if nothing was going on. We drove for hours on end. Luckily, I was wearing a watch my dad gave me for my birthday. It had a GPS system on it, so I could see where we were going. They were driving miles away from our hometown. Where were they heading? I managed to tear a little piece of fabric and some foam from one of the back seats. I could peer through the little hole in the back seat to observe what was happening in the car. Casey was driving. A few hours later and 300 miles away from home, I was starving and my legs felt numb. I had a piece of candy in my back pocket that I sucked on for 10 minutes. Another hour passed and I really had to go to the toilet. I desperately wanted to get out of this tight space. I was biting on my lip. I really had to wee. Where was I going to go? Luckily, there was a plastic bottle. I took it and used it. It was so gross and difficult to manage, but I felt relieved afterwards. I saw on my GPS watch that we were approaching a gas station. Casey slowed down. "Time to stretch legs and get some food," she said. Through the hole, I could see them getting out of the car. I wanted to get out. If only I had a metal cutter or hammer, I could break out. With the two of them gone, I tore at the seat. I tried to remove as much foam and seat cover as I possibly could in order for me to see and hear better. I did it in such a way that they couldn't see me, but I could see them. Casey and my brother got back in the car. I could smell their food. Casey didn't finish her fries, and she placed them on the back seat. I carefully reached out and grabbed her fries. It was the best tasting fries ever. I was so tired and completely covered in sweat. I fell asleep. I only woke up when the car came to a standstill. We've been driving for more than 12 hours. I was so cold as it was already dark. My watch said that we were near the ocean at a harbor. What the hell were they doing here? I could hear men's voices approaching the car. One man with a deep voice said, "Do you have the payment?" Through the hole, I could see Casey handing him a big envelope. "Yes, it's all there. You can count." I could hear the guy counting the money. $20,000. Then Jimmy finally said something. "Okay, here is my dad's phone number. He's probably still at work, so give him some time to get home and discover we're gone before you make the call." The men agreed. I could hear loud motorbikes roaring, and off they went. Jimmy and Casey jumped back in the car. Casey said, "Just a few more days and we'll be stinking rich." They both laughed. "Haha, when those guys tell my dad that we've both been kidnapped, he'll deposit $2 million into your offshore account in less than a minute." Damn fool. Did I hear correctly? Was my brother planning his own kidnapping? And now he wants to blackmail my dad for $2 million? I knew my dad was a really wealthy businessman. That's probably why Casey married him after my mom passed away, because she definitely didn't love him. I had to do something, but what could I do, stuck in this trunk? I had to get out. A few moments later, Jimmy and Casey stopped at a hotel. My GPS watch said it was the Sun Lake Hotel. They took their bags from the car's back seat and went inside. I had to get out of this trunk. I remember a documentary where they demonstrated how to get out of one when you've been kidnapped. I couldn't quite remember how to do it. I started fiddling around with the wires. A shock went through my body. I got electrocuted. I think I passed out for a few minutes. The taste of copper wires was really good, so I bit through them again, and voila, the trunk opened. Cautiously, I climbed out of the trunk. The hotel looked very sketchy. I could see Jimmy and Casey checking into a hotel room. They were standing in the entrance of the hotel. They got their keys from the front desk. Jimmy was holding Casey around her waist. And then they kissed. Like proper kissing, not a friendly stepmom-stepson kind of kiss. They were together, like a couple. Oh my God! And they've probably been doing this behind my dad's back for months. Now they want to blackmail him. I had to do something about it. I waited for them to go up to their room, and then I would make a dash to the nearest phone. Just as I was about to ask the desk assistant if I could borrow his phone, I could hear the sound of loud motor bicycles roaring. The only place I could hide was in the trunk, and so I jumped back in. The bad men on their motorbikes parked right next to the car. Their voices were a bit muddled underneath the loud noise of their motorbike. The guy who works at the reception came walking towards them. I could hear the one bad guy say, "We want to know every move they make. You better let us know where they are at all times." The reception guy agreed and left. I had to warn my brother. The motorbike sound disappeared in the distance. Again, I tried to get out of the trunk. Just as I stepped outside, Jimmy and Casey were walking out of the hotel. They were holding hands and kissing. Gross! They were probably going out for a late dinner. I had no choice but to get back into the trunk. If I wanted to warn my brother, I had to approach him when Casey wasn't around. While they were eating dinner, I decided to finally get out of the trunk. I looked like a homeless person, but I didn't care who saw me. I slipped into the restaurant and dashed past everyone eating. I made my way into the men's restroom. I waited in one of the stalls for my brother. He was bound to use the little boys' room in a few minutes. I peeked underneath the stall door to see my brother. Finally, he came into the restroom. I unlocked my stall door, opened it up, and pulled him in. He was so shocked. "Haley, what are you doing here?" I could ask you the same question. What the hell are you doing with Casey? Are you two together? How can you do this to Dad? "Haley, you don't know anything. I love Casey. And you don't know what she's capable of." It was as if Casey had a magic spell over my brother. He said, "I don't know how you got here, but if I were you, I would go home now." How could I go home when we were halfway across the country? My brother looked at me and said, "Be safe. I'm going to pretend that I didn't see you here." I wanted to shake him, but he left. My eyes started tearing up. My brother just saved me, so I had to save him. I couldn't let them get away. I snuck out of the restaurant and back into the trunk. I had to follow them. No time to waste. After dinner, they started the car's engine and drove off. Just when I thought we would go back to the hotel, my brother and my stepmom decided to take a detour at a scenic point. Things got a bit steamy in the car. It was so uncomfortable. Finally, after hours, they stopped the car back at the hotel and went up to their room. The sun was rising already. Now was my chance. I jumped out of the trunk and ran towards the front desk. "Can I please borrow your phone?" Luckily, the guy agreed. He was too tired to worry anyway. My dad answered the phone. "Sweetheart, is that you? Are you okay?" "Yes, Dad, but something horrible is going to happen." I told my dad what Casey and Jimmy were planning. My dad jumped into action. "Haley, where are you?" "I'm at the Sun Lake Hotel in Sun City." My dad said, "That's halfway across the country. Are you wearing that watch I gave you?" "Yes, it told me where I was." "Push the green button at the top of it. Now you'll be able to share your location. Make sure you follow your brother and Casey. I'm coming." I could hear my brother and Casey laughing and coming down the stairs. I put the phone down on the front desk and ran to the car, where I jumped in the trunk again. The little light on my watch was flashing. They drove to a secluded area where they met the dangerous men. Casey had a laptop on her lap. The men said, "Okay, you two, we're going to make the call, but as soon as the old man transfers the money, 50% is ours." What? No way! They got into a big fight. It sounded like the bad man punched my brother. Casey yelled, Okay, just do it." The man told everyone to keep quiet as he dialed my dad. The bad man told my dad that he captured his wife and his son, and for a ransom of $2 million, he will let them go. I could tell that my dad agreed immediately. The man read the bank details. A notification went off. The guy forced Casey and Jimmy into their van. "We're not letting you go until we get our share." At that moment, police sirens approached. My dad phoned the Sun City Police. Thank goodness. They were here to save us. I jumped out of the car's trunk. Free at last. The van drove off at speed. The police drove as fast as they could. But after a 3-hour high-speed chase, Casey and Jimmy were gone. A day later, they found my brother, tied up in front of the police station. He later told police that Casey ran off with the bad guy. She immediately transferred the $2 million, so the bank couldn't reverse it. Jimmy and my dad were taken for a fool. Needless to say, $2 million didn't even make a dent in my dad's fortunes. As for my dumb brother, he had to do 1-year community service. After Casey left, everything went back to normal, and we were a happy family again.
Hi, my name is Dawn, and I want to share an experience that I went through. I lost my vision, but when it came back, I was devastated. You might find it weird to hear someone who used to be blind complaining about seeing again. Well, if you hear me out, you'll understand why I say that. My story starts when I was 12 years old. My parents and I were driving out of town for my new baby cousin's christening. It was such an amazing day, and I had such a fun time seeing all my family whom I didn't normally see often. Plus, my mom and dad bought me this totally expensive and gorgeous dress. It was all purple, with sequins and sparkles, and it was super soft. I was really in love with it. The day was great and everyone was happy, but during the party after the christening, I went to find my mom and dad, and oh my God, they were standing outside and shouting at one another. It was so awkward and I felt so confused. Why were they fighting? I didn't want them to know I had seen them. So I ran away and hung around with my aunt and uncle for the rest of the day. When it was time to leave, my parents came and found me. They were both smiling, and it seemed like whatever was going on between them before was now over. I felt so relieved that everything was okay again. Then it happened. We were driving down the highway on our way home, and all of a sudden, bam! Another car slammed into the side of us. I don't really remember what happened very well. All I remember is that suddenly, my world went black. Apparently, another driver had merged into our lane without checking his mirrors and caused the accident. My parents and my doctor later told me I ended up in a coma for 2 weeks after the crash. Not that I remembered those weeks. When I finally did wake up, everything was still black. It was so strange. I kept blinking, but nothing appeared. It was like my eyes were staying closed even when they were wide open. I panicked and screamed. The doctors had to sedate me to get me to calm down. Eventually, after a lot of crying and confusion, I was ready to hear what was going on. The doctor told me that I had suffered a blow to my head, which had caused damage to my optic nerve, and meant I would have problems with my vision. Even then, they didn't expect me to totally lose my sight, but I did. My parents were devastated. I was devastated. It really, really sucked. Adjusting to my new world was hard. The world around me seemed the same in every way. I could still hear people talking. I could feel the bed I was sitting on. I could taste the jello I was given. But I saw none of it. All I saw was black. It was like the night sky was covering me all the time, except there were no stars. It was really scary at first. I had always been afraid of the dark as a child, and now darkness was my entire world. There was no nightlight I could turn on. When I left the house, I could feel the sunlight on my skin, but I couldn't see it anymore. I was sad for a really long time about it. I think it was worse for me than people who were born blind. because I knew what I was missing out on. At night, I would dream that I could see again. I would see all the beautiful flowers in the garden in their different colors. Red, blue, purple. I would see the bright blue sky. I'd be able to put on a new dress and admire it without having to ask my mom what color it was. My life changed in other ways, too. I was sent away from my school to somewhere else, somewhere that had teachers with special training and extra equipment to help me learn. I was taught this funny way of reading with my fingers. Mrs. Ebsen called it Braille, but really it was just bumps on a piece of plastic that meant different letters. The only upside to everything was that my parents finally let me get a dog. It was a specially trained golden retriever who could help me move around outside the house without my parents. Not that they would let me do that very often. I named him Riley, and I never went anywhere without him. I spent the next 4 years trying to make the most of my life. I'd never have to think about it before, but it turned out that being blind didn't totally hold me back much. Once I got the hang of Braille and began using Riley to get around outside, I started to get back to enjoying my life again. I made new friends at my new school, and life seemed kinda normal, at least as normal as it could be. Then everything changed again. My doctor told my parents they could try some experimental new surgery that might restore my eyesight. I couldn't believe it. After 4 years, I'd gotten used to not seeing, but that didn't mean I wouldn't take my sight back in a heartbeat. So I told my parents I wanted to try it, and they agreed. They wanted to do anything to help me. A few months later, I was back in the hospital and ready for surgery. It was super scary. I was worried the entire time that I hadn't done the right thing. What if something went wrong? What if I got my hopes up and it was all for nothing? My mind was racing with terrible thoughts, but I tried to ignore them. I went under, and then all of a sudden, I was waking up again. Instead of darkness, I was surrounded by blinding white light. At first, it was almost too much. I was so overwhelmed that I threw my hands over my eyes to try to block it out. It was giving me a headache. Everything was so bright now. My parents were worried about my reaction, but the doctor gave me an eye mask and said it was normal for things to be too much at first. So they took me home and sat me in the living room, where I tried to take the mask off. My parents left me alone so I could do it at my own pace, with no pressure. This time, everything wasn't quite so bright. My parents had drawn the curtains and left the lights off to give me time to adjust. All I could see were shadows at first in the dim light, but slowly, everything began to take shape. I could see the fireplace in my living room for the first time in years. I cried with happiness. I couldn't help it. The surgery had worked. I had never been so overjoyed in my entire life. But as I calmed down a little, I noticed something. The living room was practically empty. All of my mom's antique collectibles that she'd kept on the mantel above the fireplace were gone. The paintings on the wall were missing too. Feeling confused, I turned my head from left to right, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Then it hit me. They must have sold them. They must have sold things to pay for my surgery. I went into the kitchen to find them and asked them what had happened. But when I got there, I didn't think that they were my parents. I didn't recognize them at all. My mom was thin as a rake and my dad's eyes were black underneath from tiredness. Just how hard they had worked themselves. All for my sake? They told me that it wasn't just the surgery that was expensive. The tuition for my new school had cost them a lot, and so had my constant doctor's appointments. They had to buy books in Braille for me, and the seeing eye dog was pricey too. They had taken out a loan to cover my surgery, and would be working long hours and double shifts to pay for it. I wanted to cry again, but not from happiness this time, from guilt. I couldn't believe I had caused my parents so much pain. So I decided right then and there that I would make it up to them. I resolved to get my own part-time Saturday job as soon as my sight settled. And that's exactly what I did. The local grocery store and I was due for my first shift last Saturday. When I turned up, they told me I wasn't going to be able to start. Apparently, my dad had called and told them he forbidden me from working. I was more confused than ever before. Why would he do that when it meant I could help with our family's money problems? When I got home, I confronted my dad about it. And instead of being angry, he started crying. That on the day of the accident, he'd had one was his fault, I'd forgive him because we're family. He calmed down a little after that and finally agreed to let me work and help pay off the loan. It all worked out for the best, really. I enjoyed working in the grocery store and speaking to new people every day. And the little extra income meant my mom and dad could both take Sundays off. So Sunday became family day, and we spent it together every week to remind ourselves how lucky we are to have one another. Looking back at things now made me realize how lucky I am for having a family that supported me throughout that phase of my life. And to be honest, I can't say that I wish things took a different direction because I owe my new self to this incident. I became a stronger person and stopped taking things for granted as I used to in the past. I also learned to appreciate the small things in life, as sometimes they make all the difference. I guess that sometimes we only realize the worth of what we have the moment we lose it. That's why my parents and I decided to start a foundation for blind people. Its aim is taking care of the needs of blind people and their parents. This way, we can ensure that the whole family will learn how to adapt to the situation together and go through the adjusting process as one unity. At the end of the day, a family should stick together no matter what and work together to solve any problems, as we did.